The joke never changed. "Morning, Professor Mop. Don't forget to code the coffee machine next, Einstein." They thought he didn't hear them, or maybe they just didn't care. But Harold always heard. He'd hear the way they snickered when his back was turned, how they clutched their lattes like trophies high off their own noise. He never flinched, never answered. He just kept sweeping that marble floor, slow, careful circles, like he was drawing something sacred into the silence. The lobby of Altisync HQ buzzed each morning with overconfidence. 20-somethings in Patagonia, vests and startup sneakers breezing past like they already owned the place. The ones who arrived earliest always saw him first, bent over, balding, mop in hand, wearing that same faded navy uniform with no name tag. They never asked who he was. They just assumed. Harold swept like he'd been born with the broom, like the rhythm of maintenance was a language only he spoke. He cleaned under the rotating sculpture near the entrance, always careful not to scratch the chrome. He polished the brass handles on the front doors. He even straightened the crooked painting near the elevator that no one else ever noticed, and every now and then he'd pause, not to rest, but to think. On Monday, 2 interns took a selfie with him, mopping in the background, and tagged it. Humble beginnings. Like it was a joke. On Wednesday, someone accidentally CC'd him on an all-staff email titled "Elevator Pitches and Other People to Avoid." He was number 3 on the list. On Thursday, a senior engineer tossed his protein bar wrapper on the floor right in front of him and kept walking. Harold picked it up, quietly. He moved like a whisper in a building that only listened to noise. That's how it always went, until Friday. Because on Friday something changed. The emails were buzzing about the big investor conference happening downtown. "All hands invited to attend," the subject line said. It was the company's 10-year anniversary, and a mysterious guest keynote had been added to the program. "Industry legend," the rumors said, some OG from the early days of AI. Nobody thought twice about Harold. He was still sweeping as the employees filed out with their Altisync-branded lanyards and neon conference passes. "Bet the old guy's jealous," someone muttered. Harold simply dipped his mop into the bucket, wrung it out slowly, and glanced, just briefly, at the exit door. That was the first time someone saw him smirk. Friday morning's lobby felt emptier than usual. Most of the staff had already left for the downtown Marriott, where the 10-year anniversary conference was kicking off. Posters had gone up weeks ago, celebrating innovation, speed, and Altisync's bright young future. Not a single one mentioned the people who built the foundation, the ones who laid the bricks before the buzzwords. Harold folded his uniform jacket neatly and set it on the back of the security chair. His hands moved with an elegance no one ever noticed, like each motion was coded into him, like muscle memory from a different life. He changed into a charcoal gray suit that looked like it had history. Crisp, understated, familiar. When he stepped outside, the sunlight caught the silver in his beard. Not all of it was age. Meanwhile, the conference had already started. Inside the grand ballroom, it was all high ceilings, glass panels, and applause. A young executive in designer glasses paced across the stage, rattling off growth charts and acquisition numbers. Then came the hype. "Ladies and gentlemen," she grinned, her voice rising like a crescendo, "we're honored, truly honored, to close our founders panel with a legend, a pioneer, one of the original architects of our core AI structure. Please welcome..." She paused for effect, scanning the cue card. "Mr. Harold E. Wycliffe." Silence. A few chairs creaked. One of the interns from the selfie choked on his iced espresso. "Wait, what?" someone whispered. "No way. That can't be..." "Did she say Harold?" Then he stepped out, same posture, same pace, but no mop in hand now. His eyes scanned the crowd, not cold, not smug, Just measured. Curious, even. The way a teacher might look at a classroom that had forgotten the last lesson. The executive extended a hand. He didn't take it. He walked, past her and straight to the podium. "Some of you," Harold said slowly, his voice deep and rich like vinyl, "may know me by a different title, or not at all." A murmur passed like static through the audience. "You've stepped over me, laughed behind me, called me everything but my name." One of the software engineers slid lower in his chair. Another reached for her phone and slowly put it back down. Harold leaned forward. "But today we'll talk about legacy." The ballroom was silent, except for the soft hum of the projector. Harold stood tall at the podium, fingers resting lightly on the edge, like it was something he built. Himself, and in a way he had. "Legacy," he repeated. "It's not a product. It's not a brand refresh. It's not something you raise capital for or package for IPO." A few of the VPs shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "It's what people say when you're not in the room, or when they think you're not." He paused and glanced toward the back, where a group of interns stood frozen near the refreshment table, half-sipped smoothies still in hand. "Before Altisync had a name," he continued, "it had code. 6,000 lines handwritten on legal pads. Before we had any investors, we had nights without sleep. We had one room, 2 servers, and a dream we were scared to even say out loud." He clicked the remote in his hand. The screen behind him lit up. A photo appeared, grainy, black and white. 4 men and 2 women seated around a long folding table cluttered with wires, soldering irons, and whiteboards scrawled with looping logic trees. Harold was at the center, 20 years younger but unmistakable. His beard shorter, but the eyes were the same. Sharp, steady, scanning beyond the moment. The crowd leaned in. Quiet fell like a weighted blanket. "That was our first office, my garage," the room inhaled. "I built the original learning architecture on a processor I salvaged from a recycling yard, back when no one would fund us because the word algorithm still sounded like science fiction. I co-authored the patent that powers your data inference engine. My name's on the 4th line. You skipped it." More shifting. More phones slid quietly back into pockets. "I left the board 5 years ago. Burnt out, tired, disillusioned." He looked down for a beat, then back up, "So I came back. Not as a CEO, not as a guest speaker, but as the janitor." A gasp from somewhere near the front. One of the junior marketing leads suddenly remembered that weird day Harold had fixed the company Wi-Fi when IT was offline. "I wanted to see," he said softly, "if the house we built still had a soul, if the people inside still remembered how to look up instead of looking down." A single clap rang out in the back of the room, then 2 more, then silence again. Because Harold wasn't done. His next slide came up, a screenshot of the all-staff email that had labeled him someone to avoid. A ripple of shame swept across the crowd like a cold wind. Harold didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He let the silence carry its own weight. Then he said, "You can't build the future on a foundation you don't respect." You could almost hear hearts drop when the screen flashed again. This time it wasn't a photo. It was a spreadsheet. The header read, "Foundational employees, stock options revoked without notice." A collective rustle moved through the ballroom as Harold clicked to the next tab. There it was. A list of names, dozens. People no one in that room recognized. Secretaries, early engineers, warehouse workers, even the woman who used to bring in meals during the 48-hour hackathons. Their shares, quietly erased during the company's first major restructuring. Harold's voice didn't rise, but it cut sharper than any mic drop. "You all know who cashed out when we went public," he said. "But do you know who couldn't pay their mortgage because of that same IPO?" A man in the front row, one of the co-founders still on the board, rubbed his forehead as if erasing memory could erase truth. "I swept the floor you walk on," Harold said, letting the sentence hang. "But that floor is mine." A few people glanced at each other, confused. But the old VP of operations, retired now, he sat near the back with his arms crossed, nodding slowly like he already knew what was coming, because this wasn't about a keynote. This was a reckoning. A young product manager raised her hand hesitantly. "Mr. Wycliffe, if I may, why didn't you say something earlier?" Harold turned to her. His eyes weren't angry. "Just tired." "I did," he replied. "I said it when I showed up. Every day, quietly, with humility, with pride. I said it by fixing your broken thermostat, by polishing the door with your names on it. I said it by being what this company forgot how to be." A long pause. "And none of you heard me because you were too busy talking." The mic buzzed, then he stepped back from the podium, but not before clicking one last slide. It was the building's deed title, Wycliffe Holdings LL owner, Harold Ernest Wycliffe, date of transfer 3 years ago. The room exploded, not with sound, but with silence so loud it pressed against the walls. The lobby, the offices, the marble floors, the whole of Altisink's flagship headquarters, belonged to him, the same man they laughed at while he swept his own property. Nobody moved. Not the interns by the smoothie bar. Not the executives in the front row with their custom-stitched lapels and trembling hands. Not even the founder still on the board, now frozen in his chair, pale, sweating. The air was tight, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Harold looked out over the sea of faces, some wide-eyed with horror, others flushed with the heat of recognition. The few who knew, the ones who remembered his name from old company law, looked down now ashamed they hadn't spoken up. But Harold didn't stand there gloating. He just waited. Waited for anyone, to finally see what had been in plain sight. "You all remember the daylight leaseback deal, right?" Harold said quietly, gesturing toward the final slide. "The agreement that let the company stay in the building while offloading the real estate for liquid assets." Most nodded. It had been hailed internally as a brilliant strategic move. To expand internationally. Harold's mouth curled not into a smile, but into something close to grief. "Well, I was the buyer." He stepped forward. "I bought the building you work in, with the money you forgot I had. Because while some of you were celebrating your Series C on yachts and forgetting who built the code that brought you there, I was busy buying silence, buying privacy. And watching. You could hear a pin drop, then a breath catch. I didn't do it to punish you, not at first. I did it because I loved what this place used to be. I wanted to protect the soul of it." He glanced down at the edge of the stage, then back up. "But the soul is gone." A man in a navy blazer, head of internal PR, finally found his voice. "So, what are you saying? You're evicting us?" Harold stepped down from the stage, walked slowly to the center aisle. Every step echoed like it had purpose. "No," he said calmly. "I'm offering a choice." He turned to the crowd. "Anyone who remembers what this company used to stand for, integrity, innovation, humility, you're welcome to stay. I've already filed the paperwork to reclaim operational oversight. I'm taking my seat back on the board." Another pause. "And anyone who sees this place as just a stepping stone for their own ego, your badges won't scan on Monday." He walked back to the podium and gently picked up something from behind it. A broom, the same one from the lobby. Old, scratched, still wet from the morning. He held it in one hand. "This," Harold said, "is the tool I use to clean your messes." Then he looked at them, each one of them like a professor scanning a classroom on the day of final exams. "And this," he said, holding up the building deed in the other hand, "is the one I use to own them." By Monday morning, the lobby didn't feel the same. The silence was heavier, the light sharper, the air clearer, as if the building itself had exhaled after holding in truth too long. Harold was there early, as always, but not with a mop. He stood at the front desk, no uniform this time, no gloves, just his charcoal suit freshly pressed, and a small stack of envelopes under one arm. There was no press. No cameras, just a handful of staff trickling in, slower than usual, every step filled with hesitation. At 7:42 a.m., the first badge beeped red, then another, and another. Hey, I think my card's broken," one of the executives stammered, tapping the scanner again and again. Harold turned. "It's not broken," he said plainly. "It's just reprogrammed." The man blinked. "You can't do that. I'm VP of Global—" "No," Harold said. "You were." The former VP stared at him, rage crawling up his neck like heat. "You're serious?" Harold didn't flinch. "You called me a liability in a meeting I wasn't invited to. Then you asked me to take out the trash." The man's jaw opened, then closed. "You're free to apply again," Harold said, "but this time we'll be reviewing character before resumes." By 8:15, a small crowd had formed outside the glass doors, half confused, half humiliated. Some begged to be let, and others stood in silence, trying to piece together how a janitor just rewrote the company hierarchy. But inside, things were already moving. The security team, who Harold had quietly paid a living wage boost months ago, stood by his side. The HR director, who once gave Harold the wrong orientation pamphlet by accident, now stood at the front desk, holding a clipboard with a new employee onboarding list. Only about 40 names were on it. The rest? Locked out. At 9 a.m. sharp, Harold gathered the remaining team, the ones who stayed behind after the keynote, who approached him with quiet apologies or eyes full of something real, remorse, maybe respect. He looked at them. Engineers, janitors, admins, receptionists, the forgotten people who built the bones of Altisync. "You don't have to be loud to be heard," he said, voice steady. "You just have to be consistent. And now we begin again." Upstairs, in the old conference room where they once pitched him out of his own vision, Harold sat down at the head of the table, same chair. Different rules. He opened the first envelope from under his arm. Inside, a list of community tech centers needing support, mostly in underserved neighborhoods. The second, names of former employees who were unfairly let go, each one tagged for rehire with bonuses. The third, his original engineering notes, ink-stained, weathered, but still smarter than half the company's current patents. Harold didn't need revenge, he needed restoration. By Wednesday, the ones who were left started calling it the reset. The company's branding team, what remained of it, tried to spin the story with phrases like humble refounding and a culture course correction. But inside the building, people didn't speak in buzzwords anymore. They spoke in eye contact, in thank yous, in silence that wasn't empty but reverent, and Harold took the stairs. Every morning, 3 flights up, just like the old days, he climbed them with purpose, stopping by departments most CEOs didn't know existed. He sipped burnt coffee in the mailroom, helped rewire a forgotten network port in the east hallway, sat with the cleaning crew during lunch and asked how their kids were doing. The new interns were different. They didn't take selfies, they took notes. In conference room C, once used for flashy investor demos, Harold sat across from the only board member who'd bothered to stay after the shake-up. Linda Cho, former COO, widowed mother of 2. The only one who ever stopped to bring Harold tea when he had the flu back in 19, before she even knew his full name. "I knew," she said quietly, watching him as he reviewed hiring packets. Harold looked up. "I knew it was you. Or at least, I suspected." Nobody else wiped their shoes before entering the data center. A small smile tugged at the edge of his mouth. "I just didn't want to believe someone as brilliant as you would let yourself be forgotten." "I didn't let it happen," Harold replied. "I chose it. I needed to see who they became without me." Linda looked down. "And?" He paused, folded the paper slowly. "They became loud, entitled, addicted, to applause. And now? Harold exhaled. Now they're gone and we get to choose what rises next. Downstairs, the old lobby mural, once covered in generic tech slogans, was gone. In its place, a new wall had gone up, fresh slate, painted matte black, at the top in thick white brushstrokes. Leave your ego at the door. Bring your purpose instead. Below it, names were being added, not just founders, not just engineers, the janitor who stayed behind to fix the HVAC during a summer blackout, the receptionist who built a better client intake system in her free time, the warehouse tech who biked to work every day for 9 years and never complained once. One name at a time, the wall grew. And Harold. He never added his. He just stood at the edge of the crowd one afternoon, sipping lukewarm tea and watching a young intern copy his line of code onto the board, one he wrote in 2007 that still powered their flagship product. "Did you really write this?" she asked him, wide-eyed. Harold nodded. "On the back of a napkin at a Denny's," she laughed. "They teach it in our onboarding now, like line 1. "Line 1's a good place to start," Harold said, voice soft. The day they relaunched the company under its new values, it wasn't televised. There were no fireworks, no choreographed product unveilings, just a gathering. In the same lobby, where they once ignored him, a folding table was set up with a single binder on top. No screens, no hashtags, just a pen and one instruction. Write down what you want to leave behind, then go build it. Harold stood quietly off to the side, watching, not directing. He'd returned the building piece by piece to the people who'd earned it, transferred portions of equity to janitors, desk staff, and engineers long forgotten. Every recipient got the same envelope. No ceremony, just a note. "I remember what you built. Now, let's remember you." Some of the old employees tried to come back. They emailed. They posted apologies on LinkedIn, long and dripping with corporate guilt. A few showed up at the door in suits that didn't fit as well anymore. Harold never turned them away with anger. He simply asked, "What did you learn?" Most couldn't answer. A few cried. Some left. But a handful. They stayed. Not to lead, but to listen. One late evening, long after the building had emptied out, Harold found himself back where it all started. The supply closet. The mop was still there, his old cart, the cracked bucket, tucked neatly in the corner like a relic no one dared touch. He reached down, ran a hand across the handle, not with regret, with reverence. That broom had heard it all. The jokes, the dismissals, the whispered praise, the rebirth. He carried it out, not as a symbol, but as a reminder. That power meant nothing without purpose. That leadership wasn't volume, it was vision, lived quietly every day. In the new boardroom, they kept an empty chair at the end of the table. Not for guests, not for investors, for memory. On the back, engraved in quiet gold, he swept floors, he rewrote futures. And beneath that, smaller, Harold E. Wycliffe, founder, janitor, architect of legacy. Epilogue a year later, when a young black girl walked through the front doors on her first day as a junior developer. She paused at the lobby wall. Her name wasn't on it yet, but she saw someone sweeping in the corner, a gentle rhythm to his movements. She nodded politely. "Good morning, sir." He smiled without stopping. "Good morning." She hesitated. "Did you know Mr. Wycliffe?" The man didn't answer right away. He just said, "Keep your eyes open. You never know who built the ground you're standing on." And she did. Because legacy doesn't scream. It simply stands.